Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be venturing into the dark world of cults. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable. Get your religious trinkets, and let the darkness take control. This event took place a few years ago, but I remember it as if it were all happening right now. I live in southeast Pennsylvania in the US, and local lore tells of a road thought to be more or less haunted, or better said, inhabited. Stories tell of a satanic cult that raises spirits and the like at a church hidden in the woods near the road, and of a crazed family, some say the DuPont family, or of another unnamed family, that has lived there for generations. Locals call the area Satanville, though as you can imagine this is not the area's true town name. No matter who lives there, there's one unifying element that exists in all accounts. If you go there, a vehicle will appear and chase you out or run you off the road. If you do this and then disappear, sort of a pick your poison thing. Whichever you choose to believe in, something is out there. Their stories also mention that if you slow down and roll your windows down, you can hear whispers and footsteps just off the road, just behind the tree, and that the trees themselves are afraid of the road and will grow leaning away from it. There is also one particular tree that grows out on the side of a small hill, and the roots take the shape of a skull. I told you all of this in order to set the scene, to save you the time of having to look it all up yourself. The following account is of my trip to this place. It was a warm October night, and me and my girlfriend and our 3 friends all decided we'd heard enough about this Satanville and wanted to see for ourselves what it was all about. So we piled into our friend's Suzuki 4-door and left. The road is hard enough to find on its own because on both ends the sign reading Cossart Road have been removed, as that was the road's true name, due to, presumably, people like us going there where people like us were not wanted. We took the hard right onto the road between the 2 stone pillars and overgrowth and proceeded slowly down the road, taking in all the creepy sights. Immediately we noticed our cell phones dropped service. No bars, no Gs, no nothing. That was unsettling, but hey, sometimes that happens. But all our phones did this, and we had with us all 3 major carriers. We found that trees do indeed lean away from the road, and that there are road signs with "Go away" and "Keep out" sprayed on them. One said 666, but I chalked that up to plain old silly vandalism. We slowed to a near stop and rolled down the window to hear the whispering and the footsteps. Of course, this story wouldn't be interesting if we didn't hear them, and we did. Not so much whispering as the wind itself coming through the trees, whipping the dead leaves on the ground to make it sound like hushed consonants being muttered. However, we did hear what sounded like footsteps. Perhaps maybe it was deer rustling away from the road. This is Pennsylvania after all, and deer are everywhere, so why not a back road in the woods? We made it to the other end of the road in no particular hurry. We went very slow. We decided to take our chances and head back through the other way. We turned around, got ourselves situated, and prepared to turn back in. That's when it appeared. A 2-door Chevy Cavalier. The reason I told you how slow we went was to illustrate that no other cars were on the road with us, and we would have seen lights or heard another car coming. Yet this car appeared from the road behind us seemingly mere seconds after we did. Not a terribly imposing vehicle, except for the million candle power brights it had, and the otherworldly roar of its engine. I know what a terrible muffler sounds like, and this was not it. This car had had work done to make it quick and powerful. It stopped facing the road perpendicular to us, so our light beams were crossed. It revved its engine twice and peeled away down the road behind us. We were spooked, but otherwise not affected by it, and laughed it off. That is until it began turning around. It snapped around in a hurry and was about 50 yards back when it began blaring its horn and revving again. My friend Laurie, who was driving, screamed, "Oh my God, turn around." We all panicked and began yelling and screaming. Laurie demanded I drive, as she felt I would do better driving than her. I'm a dude, but frankly, I was equally as scared as she was, and hopped out of the car and took my place. The car must have seen us do this, because with a scream of its tires it was after us. I took to the left, back onto the road, and in no time this car was on our back, with inches to spare. Who or what was driving this car had done this before. It made no sign of slowing around some of the sharper turns and slopes. Whoever this was knew the road well. They were behind us and laying on the horn, and no speed I'd dare reach on this unfamiliar road would shake them. We reached a wider point in the road, and the car passed us. Like a ghost, it seemed to almost pass through the hill next to us, because while the road was wider, it wasn't two cars next to each other wide. It began to pull away, and I remembered the part of the story of these cars where they disappear into the woods. I did my best to keep up with it, but he pulled further away until I could only catch his taillights around every corner. We reached the end of the road, and there it was, parked next to the exit facing away from us. Lights off, silent. I bravely and stupidly decided to attempt to see inside the vehicle, but the windows were tinted too dark to see in. At this moment, the car sprang to life, as if it were some creature disturbed, and revved its engine and honked. I floored it out of there and onto the main road. I don't know who it was that chased us back out there, but I do know something did not want us there. Some unnamed person lurking in the woods, waiting for people like us to drive by, getting a little too big for their britches. Regardless of what chased me, I know for certain I won't be returning anytime soon to Satanville, Pennsylvania. My father stopped going to the Creation Museum's church after he approached the pastor and asked why he and my brother were not allowed to have communion. The pastor told him, "I understand your concern, but we feel that since we don't know how good of a Christian you are, you and your sons should not be allowed to partake in communion, as it may contaminate innocence with your sins." They also demanded a huge amount of tithe and insisted at the time that any church others than theirs may not always be true Christians, and that going to churches other than theirs was wrong. They also insisted that people attending the church should also visit the Creation Museum, and if you questioned anything in it, it was sinful. They also told my dad and brother that unbaptized children shouldn't be near baptized children, presumably from the same contamination reason. We were just talking about it the night before last, and my father said, "I swear to you that's a cult in the making, and we haven't been there since." Also, my cousin was involved in the Mars Hill Church in Seattle. He was involved with a girl for over 2 years and planning to marry her. Eventually, they decided to sleep together. This was outrageously frowned upon at Mars Hill, and afterwards, the girl went to the Mars Hill pastor and told him that she and my cousin had had relations out of wedlock. Cue Mars Hill pastor bringing my cousin to the front of the church in front of the entire church body and publicly humiliating him, telling him he'd go to hell. The girl was forbidden from ever even being in the same room as him and has refused to speak to him since. My cousin tried to defend himself, and they started publicly and privately harassing him. People even going as far to harass him in public places like coffee shops or grocery stores. Eventually, Mars Hill did a public apology to my cousin and my cousin left the country entirely and now lives in Australia as a raging atheist and racist, dating a girl nobody in our entire family likes. My aunt and uncle, who he had been staying with in Seattle at the time, are prominent figures in Seattle, and while my aunt is a Buddhist and my uncle occasionally visit Mars Hill, they tried to get the pastor to apologize more appropriately, and he refused, telling my uncle it didn't matter anymore because my cousin made his choice. A couple of years later, the pastor and his wife had a sleep-in or whatever, where they spent all day in bed on the roof of the church to display how a truly loving couple should be, and my aunt and uncle were pretty pissed. I swear up and down Mars Hill is a cult, and that the pastor is the worst person in Seattle. I can guarantee God disapproves of him. My story began in March of 2017. I am a 19-year-old male. My family and I moved to this new house around that time. I was really excited because this house was huge and I got a beautiful garden with a pool and a hot tub. I'm not bragging, but this information will be important later. When we moved in, the real estate agent told my parents and me that there have been a series of home invasions in our street, and that our house and our neighbor's house were the only ones which they hadn't broken into yet. The first weird things started to happen in May of 2017. My room is at the patio, so when I look out to my garden, I can see the patio and the hot tub. At first, I could hear the gate of our garden being opened at night. That was continuing for the next 10 weeks. Sometimes we would go outside in the morning and all the lamps would be bashed in. Yes, 10 weeks in, like this property is haunted by a poltergeist, since we hadn't seen anyone doing it. At first we thought it was some burglars, and that they were opening our garden gate at night because every morning my parents opened the patio door so that our dog can pee, while one of my parents would get dressed to go for a morning walk. So I guess the burglars were hoping for our dog to run off so they would have it easy to enter our home. All these incidents made me and my mum feel really unsafe in our own home. All of a sudden it stopped, and we thought that the person/people who did this had moved on or got bored. But after 5 months, everything started all over again, but worse. In November, I woke up to footsteps outside my window, so I opened my eyes and wished I wouldn't have done that. At that moment I was so scared. I saw a man of 6'3" standing outside my window watching me sleep. He looked so old yet so young. He had a young face, but a haircut that aged him 25 years. At least, that's what I could see in the dark. I was frozen. I couldn't move, so we just looked at each other in the eyes for what felt like an eternity. Suddenly, he ran off, so I took my chance and ran to my parents' room and told them everything. My dad grabbed his gun, which he was keeping at home now because he was worried over the past few months, as he's a police officer. He ran outside but couldn't find the man, but only a broken gate, so he called the police. The police, 2 of his colleagues actually, came but they couldn't do much, so they left rather promptly. 2 months later, I woke up to a splashing sound. I look out my window and noticed the sound was coming from the pool, but I couldn't see it due to trees blocking my way. So I shrugged it off because I thought there's just something wrong with the pump, which wasn't a rare thing. So I went back to bed. But I had a hard time falling asleep since the sound grew louder and more intense. So I got up and went into the living room, which allowed me to see the entire garden. When I looked outside, I got the same feeling which I had 2 months ago when I spotted the guy outside my window. Anyway, so I looked outside and saw the same man standing in our pool, draining our pool with a small cup. And I mean it how I said it. He was standing in our pool with a cup, throwing the pool water on the grass. He had this dead stare in his eyes, like he didn't even know what he was doing. He noticed me watching him and just smiled at me while diving down, like that's his way to escape. I woke up my dad, who immediately called the police. They left as fast as they came since they didn't find anything but an empty pool. They said he was probably homeless and was just washing himself, but I'm certain that's not what he was doing. As of now, August 2018, I noticed some strange cars standing in front of our house lately, and if someone would spot them, they'd drive off. My parents left me alone this weekend since it's my uncle's birthday. I didn't want to go, so I decided to stay at home. I got bored all alone at this big house, so I called a few friends of mine to come and hang out at my place. They came at around 7 p.m, and we started drinking some wine and listening to music. Time passes, and it was around 11 p.m. when we heard someone knocking at the window of our living room. I thought I was imagining the knocks, but my friend looked at me like they were about to ask if I was expecting someone. I turned off the music to listen, but all we heard was silence. I turned on the patio lights when a girlfriend of mine yelled, "Hey, there's someone running." I didn't see someone, but I heard the gate slam shut. I was worried, but decided not to call the police since they couldn't do anything anyway. I was really glad that my friends drank something and had a crash at my place so that I wouldn't be alone that night. The next day, my friends left at around 5 p.m. I was in my room when I heard something fall in my bathroom, so I got up to see what it was. When I walked towards the bathroom, I saw a person right behind the door. The person didn't notice I spotted him, so I walked back into my room to get my phone to call the police and parents. I wanted to go down to the den because my lock on my door was broken. When I passed the bathroom, I saw the person was still there, so I opened my camera and took a picture as proof for friends and family. When I took the photo, I didn't think to turn on the flash when I took the image, and it illuminated the entire bathroom, and the door slammed shut. I thought that was my chance to abandon the house completely, so I ran right out my house and called the police. They were there in 10 minutes. They went inside and came out with the same man who was terrorizing me and my family for over a year and a half now, naked. The police said he was just sitting in our bathtub, just staring at the drain. He was constantly saying, "The cult elder will eliminate you." Right now, I'm sitting here in my room writing this story. I'm worrying about the cult he was talking about. Are the suspicious cars in front of my house part of the cult? Or was he just an insane man? This entire event doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know what is yet to come, but my family and I are now going to move again in December. I accidentally was in a religious cult. I would see how the pastor would treat non-members and members that didn't comply with what he wanted, and I would think, I hope he doesn't start acting this way towards me. He would berate people, gossip, expect us to stay at his house until late hours, and forbid us from hanging out with non-members. He even asked me to move in there when I had already found my own place. I noticed it was a cult when I told them I was hanging out with an old friend, and proceeded to ask me why I was doing that, and that they were my friends. I came to the service the following Sunday, and the pastor sees me and says, "I had a message I was going to preach, but I'm going to preach it a different way today." The whole service was pretty much him, talking horrible things about me and making rude jokes. I knew this sermon was about me when he kept referring to person, hanging out with other people, and saying it was sinful and of the world. I'd never felt more embarrassed in my life with everyone laughing at me. I just sat there taking it the whole service. Once I left, several of the members attempted to contact me, a few of them trying to go to the movies with me at midnight, when they knew damn well the closest movie theater was an hour away, and what movie theater would show movies at midnight? After I stopped going to that church, A few members completely stopped talking to me, despite us being friends. I still can't believe that happened. I was part of a cult church. When I was invited, soon after I started attending school at UF. Since I was looking for a church to attend, this worked out great. I was invited by a really nice guy and started attending every service, getting to know everyone and making great friends. The services seemed to be a bit extreme, a little too fire and brimstone, but I decided to ignore that and focus on what I agreed with them. I started to get a little bit uncomfortable when they tried to get me to recruit people on the street, but I really felt very uneasy when they said I shouldn't hang out with my friends that followed other religions and even other family members because they weren't good influences. Despite all this, I kept going because of the people there. It wasn't until my sociology class did a unit on cults and how they work, being nice and friendly and then trying to separate people from their friends and family so they won't be persuaded to leave. After that, I decided to stop attending services, although I stayed in touch with some people. It's a real shame because most of them are born-again Christians and don't know that a real church isn't like that. They're great people, just led by the wrong person. I started realizing I was in a cult when things made less sense as I grew older. I started to find serious plot holes in the holy doctrine of the cult. No one would answer my questions, and I was punished a lot for being a rebellious kid, just because I wouldn't participate in activities without questioning them. Everyone outside the cult was evil and a slave to the system, including former cult members. When my older sister left, I remember crying hysterically because I'd been told that backsliders go to hell. When I had school friends over that weren't in the cult, back before the cult forced all cult children to be pulled out of public school and into homeschooling, school friends were weirded out. When I went to school friends' houses and noticed they had everything I was told was evil, like books and movies and stickers, as we could only listen or watch media produced by the cult. Some old PG movies were okay after careful screening. When I got a hold of some material written by a former cult member, laying out its horrible history and talking about life outside, was when I realized that all this intimate stuff wasn't normal. There was also the fact that when the son of the leader tried to end his mum for abusing him throughout his childhood, and in a dark way, he also ended the life of his childhood babysitter, and then his own. I sat in commune meetings reading a statement denying the accusations, condemning the son as insane and going to hell, and mourning the death of the babysitter. Like you guys, the stuff his accusations were based on were all documented. Literally, it's all on paper, pictures and recordings. I think that day was the day the last bit of my faith died. Thankfully, my family left the cult shortly after. About 2 weeks ago, my two friends and I were bored, and we had just been walking around the area where I lived. As we strolled to the shops, we saw a huge chain-link fence with a lock the size of my fist cutting off an alleyway. I called that it was a house up for sale that was being renovated when the owner went bankrupt. Evidently, they never returned. Being the stupid teens that we were, we thought it would be cool to go and check it out. And at this point I should mention that the area was a lot less built up in terms of housing and shops, as we were in a countryside kind of place. So, we scaled the 6-foot fence and hit the track leading up to the house at a fast pace. We get our first look at the house, and it's obvious that it's been unattended for quite some time. The windows were all plastered with newspapers from 6 years ago, and both the garage and large shed had collapsed through the roof. Yeah, it was quite nasty. We go around the right side of it first and peer through the dirty window panes. All we could make out was a construction worker's jacket, which I must say appeared fairly new, but that was impossible because work here stopped weeks ago. Next to the collapsed garage was a large ditch filled with age-old manure. We go back around and investigate the left side. I instantly flipped out and started backing off when on at least 6 walls throughout the side archway were covered with pentagrams and 666s. One of my friends was unsure what all that meant, so I had to educate him on it all. We all became kind of on edge. We slowly tread through the archway, and on our side was a whitewashed wooden door with a shiny silver doorknob. This time someone had gone all out. On the door was a pentagram with ram horns as well as blood in a handprint placed in the middle. Underneath it was simply written, Hell. We debated whether or not to go inside, and one of my friends plucks up the courage to do so. Inside the dark room was a broken, dirty toilet. I'll let you imagine what the smell was like, and an old fridge down on its side. We opened the fridge just to humor ourselves. We wished we hadn't. Inside was a Tupperware box with legit, bloody, severed human fingers. Needless to say, we ran with the wind carrying us home. Anonymous fingerless man, let's not meet. My mum's aunt's husband, William, was born in a place in our country that is well known for practicing black magic, and he managed to live with my mum's aunt Maria, as well as his 2 sisters. By living, I mean he was their romantic partner. Nobody could believe that my Aunt Maria was doing that. Every time someone asked why she was with him, she responded, I don't know. Years passed, and one of William's sisters gave birth to a baby girl. When the girl reached puberty, he took her as a partner also. Maria started having discussions with him, and William decided to move to another house with his 2 sisters and niece/daughter, although he was still Maria's partner. Time passed, and one of my grandma's friends came to visit. When she heard about Maria's situation, she went to her house, and she told that William was using secrets to keep her head down and accept whatever he'd do. The old lady told Maria there's got to be a work in the property she was living, and they started looking for it. A few hours later, my mum says they found a small glass container buried next to the main door. Inside, a black substance and other items. Maria asked the old lady if she should throw that thing into a river, as it's a common belief, but the old lady said doing it would be a mistake. If she threw it into a river, she could never be free from that work. Instead, they should burn it. My mum's aunt did it, and left the man the next day, and stopped being ill all the time. Now, on to the next story. Turns out that while Maria was still living with William, people living in the same town started reporting sightings of a big pig that appeared at night and would attack them. Maria said when William heard about the pig, he laughed and said he wished the pig would appear to him. A few nights later, he was going home from a bar late at night, and he said the pig came out from a secondary street and ran at him. William said he took out a knife that he carried everywhere and cut the pig in the stomach. The pig ran away bleeding and screaming. Maria says that William left the next day to visit one of his best friends and came back a bit shaken. Apparently, when William asked to speak to Charles, Charles' son told him he was very ill and didn't want to talk to anyone. William, being his best friend, told the kid to step aside and that they grew up together and that he wanted to see him. William says he was very angry and shocked to see Charles about to pass with a cut on his stomach. William told him he didn't know he was putting into practice knowledge from their natal city and told him he was sorry. Charles apparently could only whisper he couldn't have known, and William stayed with him until he passed. My grandma, my father's mum, told me a story 1,000,000 times of how she travelled to the other side of the country to bring my uncle back home, who was serving in the army during a civil war. She says an old lady told her a prayer that would make him invisible for them, the army people and people in the conflict, and my grandma paid a fortune for the old lady, and apparently it worked. This was a long time ago, and it took them weeks to travel from the city my uncle was at, the same city where William was born in fact, to my grandma's house. Now, my grandma always repeated the prayers at night, and told me and my sister to say it when we felt in danger. I thought it was old people stuff, but I did what I was told. My mum knew this, and a year or so ago, she came to my house and started on me, telling me how she was watching a documentary about the Holy Death Cult, or La Santa Muerte. She says she was actually falling asleep when one of the cult's practitioners started talking about some prayers and started saying the exact prayer my grandma says. Of course, it freaked her out, and I can't tell my grandma she is very religious and very old. She'd have a heart attack, I'm sure. This same grandma used to tell me how witches have rituals and prayers to change their human form to animal form, how they had to boil water and let their skin that had fallen during the ritual in there, and how it is a must to come back before dawn, or you would be trapped in the animal form forever, and that there were other tips and norms she mentioned about this, and how also you could protect yourself from them. But I don't feel very comfortable discussing all these rituals. My wife went to Lower Valley Pike. The school was extremely strict and a total dry campus. Cigarettes and alcohol would get you expelled on your first offense. The RDs and RAs were sent out to the typical places people would often try and hide in order to bust people. For this reason, she and her friends would go a good distance away to do their partying. The area was pretty remote, and there's a good deal of scenic/wooded area, so a 10 to 20 minute drive felt further away than it was, because the distance was worth it, because nobody wants to be expelled over a pack of Virginia Slim 100s. She says that Clifton, Ohio and the surrounding area were always just eerie at night, and said that in the late fall, things got very unsettling. Once, on one of these trips into BFE for some Boone's farm, she walked away from her group of friends to pee, and found a large garbage can full of domestic-type animals, dogs, cats, that had no signs of injury other than that they had had their throats cut and blood drained out completely. My wife has hunted, and is familiar with the idea that big game needs to have the blood drained so it doesn't spoil the meat, but said nobody was going to eat these animals, and she also informed me that the practice is unnecessary. Needless to say, this is enough to freak out a typical group of college girls. Another time she came across a large plastic rubber-style baby doll that again had had its throat slit. It was naked and had holes cut in inappropriate areas and stuffed with things that she can't really recall, but nothing belonging to a baby doll. She said that a number of times in her 4 years in the area, they came across a decent-sized fire set in the middle of a road randomly. She said there'd be no reason for them to be there either, no houses nearby, just wood fire on asphalt. One year she volunteered to help clean for people in the area as part of a larger service project. She and a friend went to one house, and she says she experienced a complete feeling of utter dread the whole time she was there with no explanation. Just a pit of your stomach feeling that something very bad is going to happen, and every part of your body is screaming at you to get away. She didn't see anything or have any odd occurrences while being there, just that the whole place felt bad and the woman of the house was weird. When I asked her to elaborate, she said she couldn't. My wife says she also assumes it was some kind of satanic stuff the whole time, and a few of her friends actively went out looking for the creepy things after they came across them the first few times, but could never find them again, and she said that they made her feel sick. I didn't know my wife when she was in college, so I've asked her to take me and show me around and tell me stories, take me to the local places. And she did, once. She showed me her dorm and stuff, and on the way out there in the middle of nowhere there was a random house with things hanging in a tree that weren't decorations. Kids' toys perhaps? I told her to pull over and asked if she saw it, and she just kept going on and said, "Don't look, just ignore it. We don't want to know." We only live an hour away, but she really doesn't like going back and spending any more time on or around campus. She doesn't like to talk about this stuff, and based on that reaction, I can tell that she was really shaken by it all. I started Impramerica in spring of 2010. Back then, Sunday was the day no one worked. That changed to, you should earn your Sunday off. Early on it was, if you wanted to miss a big event, well, we can't force you to go. Eventually it became, you better go, no excuse. Having outside interests was frowned upon, to the point that there was no discussion about them. Primerica was sold to me, and I sold it to other people as freedom. But when I left in summer of 2012, there didn't seem to be any freedom remaining. It felt like there could be no discussion inside the office that wasn't Primerica related, even if you're in the bathroom eating lunch. I mean, some of us were having to gather outside of the office, often a building or two away, to talk about something that had nothing to do with Primerica, or even voice our concerns about the company. Yes, at their place, where you work, you may be concerned about complaining about the company inside the building. However, you aren't concerned about talking about non-work stuff while at lunch in the break room. I had an upline who didn't want us to talk about non-work stuff in the office at all. That is not freedom. There was a speaker from out of state who came to speak with us. There was an upcoming convention, and they spoke of a convention where they maxed out their credit cards to personally rent a bus for their recruits. But they had no recruits, so that was motivation to start really recruiting and have them pay their share for a seat on said bus. So, this rippled into our office, where we were expected to personally invest some more into trips, buses, tickets, hotels, and have our downlines pay us back. When your downline is a part-time waitress who has to save up to take her insurance test, you honestly can't drop her the news that she's also on the hook for paying you back for her seat and hotel share that you already paid for, and yes, she still has to pay for her tickets. Hey, great news, Rosie. In addition to that licensing test and the money you have to pay out for your fingerprints in order for your insurance license, you also need to pay me $50 for your bus seat and your share of the hotel that we as a group will be sharing, about $20, and your food is also on you. In addition, it's $75 for your ticket to this convention, and no, you can't just attend the major events, you're expected to attend a few of the workshops, which are also $25 each. And that also added to the cult-like problems I felt. I was licensed, I was making sales, and the company was nickel and diming me every time I turned around. Major events I had to buy no less than 5 tickets. Not the convention, but every 3-month events, and having my recruits buy them from me, as well as sell them when recruiting to new people. To start making this money, you need to give me at least a list of 100 people and their phone numbers, as well as $100. We have a big event next month, and attendance is compliant, and that's $20. Please, if you have $100, then you have $120. You don't have to pay me for the ticket now, you just make some minor cuts over the week, and you'll have the $20 for this life-changing event ticket. Yeah, I felt dirty saying stuff like that. There was also that I had to pay subscriptions for the online tool used to sell policies to families and additional material like pamphlets and such, and I also had to pay for them myself. I have worked in sales before, but I was never expected to pay for sales tools. having to constantly police what I talk about, and seeing my commission checks drained by the very company I'm selling for. Think about that episode of The Boondocks, where the little girl wants to buy a pony. So she sells lemonade to some rich guy, makes her a deal where he would help her get her pony via the lemonade stand. But eventually it's clear that he screwed her over and she would have to pay for all the supplies and send her money to him, where she was actually losing money while he made all the money, even though he did no work and no financial involvement, just collecting the money. That's almost how Primerica felt when I left. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. As always, a huge thank you to my incredible patrons for your donations. It really does make a difference with the channel. If you'd like to find out more about Patreon, you can find the information at the top of the description. If you liked the video, don't forget to show it some love. Drop a like, leave a comment with your thoughts, as that really helps me out. And if you're new here, why not subscribe and consider pressing the bell icon to be notified every time I post? That'd be awesome. If there's a story that you would like to share and have it read on the channel in the near future, you can submit it to my Reddit or my email, and all information is also available in the description. But with that being said, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.